25 years I served in the agency. Your use of force in all the training and all the real world operations that I was involved in, minimal amount of force necessary to complete the law enforcement objective. Mm-hmm. If that's an arrest, if that's a clearing of a building, whatever it may be. And that force can escalate and de-escalate at a moment's notice. Just because you escalate, you don't stay there. You know, maybe the person's like, oh shit, I'm good. Bring it back down. And what I see here is it's just straight to the top.
My guest today is Eric Balliet, a retired special agent who spent 25 years with the Department of Homeland Security, arresting dozens of human traffickers, smugglers, and child predators. He led the wiretap strategy that led to the arrest of El Chapo, not once, but twice. He won multiple law enforcement awards and was even named the Federal Law Enforcement Association's Agent of the Year. I'm excited to have him on today to talk about some of the crazy operations he was involved in. He's actually sitting right in front of me. I'm excited to talk about our mutual friend El Chapo and your thoughts on Trump's immigration raids. Eric Balliet, welcome to The Hidden Third.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell me a little bit about growing up and how that led to law enforcement.
Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of Syracuse, New York, called Baldwinsville. Mm-hmm. Lived on a dead-end street in a white colonial house. My dad was an accountant. My mom was a registered nurse. I have a younger sister. It was really the epitome of middle-class America. Mm-hmm. I was not the best student. I loved being outdoors. I loved getting into trouble-ish. My neighbor across the street was a deputy with the Onondaga County Sheriff's Department. And somewhere in my high school days, I did a ride along with him, and he had a bomb dog, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. He would take me out, traffic stops, calls, all that sort of stuff. And I was just like, yeah, this is cool. I'm not sitting behind a desk. I'm not in a mundane 9-to-5 job. I was still in high school, so I needed to still figure some life decisions out at that point.
That's so interesting. So do you think that if that neighbor didn't exist, you wouldn't have ended up in law enforcement?
I think he was a catalyst to the decision. I think ultimately I would have arrived at the same decision. It just planted the seed early in, I was probably 15, 16 years old at the time. It just planted that seed early that was something that really interested me.
And then you went to college.
And then I went to college.
And then you left college. Were you a good student in college?
I was not a good student in college.
Also either. Okay.
No, I grew up in a very conservative household, curfews, no drinking, that sort of stuff. And when I went to college, my freshman year, the wheels came off. There was no oversight. There was no people checking in and stuff, and made some dumb decisions early. I ended up
tell me about the dumb decisions, please.
Everything from staying up all hours, not taking class seriously. I took the minimum credits needed to stay enrolled as a full-time student. I remember living in the dorms my freshman year. You couldn't have a keg or any sort of multi-beverage container. So we tried to smuggle one in, got caught by the campus security guards. They had us take it down to the residential director's office, put it there pending a disciplinary review board. Being the maybe 19-year-old resourceful guy I was, we picked the lock, stole it back, knew that they would come looking in our room. So we went to our buddies' rooms across the hall. And I had a rager party. My mom got the letter from the university saying I was being kicked out of the dorms on Mother's Day after my freshman year. So nothing felony stupid, but just some dumbass.
You're just drinking and partying.
Yeah, I did not take for the first 3 years of my college career. I didn't take seriously.
Did you have a career path in mind at this time? Were you ambitious at all? Did you think that who cares what happens after this? Or?
It just seems so far down the line.
Right,
when you're a freshman, sophomore, 18, 19 years old, graduation and career choices and stuff like that seemed so far down the line, and I was not thinking strategically. I was in the immediacy, the here and now. Where's the party tonight? What are we going to do to have fun? What are we going to do to like do some dumb shit and get in trouble? And I didn't think of anything past like what was right in front of my face.
Did you have fun?
I had a blast. Yeah, it was awesome. But at some point you have to grow up.
Yeah.
And my senior year, I interned with the New York State Police. And that's when I really started getting serious. It was a year-long program. It was divided up between like patrol, admin, CID. And,
what's CID?
Criminal Investigative Division. And then like some of their specialty units, bomb squads, K9, stuff like that. And like at that point was when I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
And then was it hard to then get in?
I had some explaining to do from the
because
previous
of your record?
2 years. I didn't get a record.
Not record,
yeah,
police
just
record,
like the dumb stuff, right?
Yeah.
So and they run 2 academy classes a year, and those are usually filled. So I still had at this point, graduation is coming quick, and I need a job. So I started applying to different departments. I wanted to get out of upstate New York and kind of just see the country and different places. So I actually tested with the U.S. Border Patrol of all places, and they offered me a job in Nogales, Arizona in the spring of '99.
Oh, so you actually never worked for the state police. You interned with them, but you didn't actually get a job.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you started in Border Patrol. This was what year? Before 9/11, right?
This was, 99, summer of 99.
Okay.
Yep.
And what was that like your first arriving in Nogales? I've been to Nogales many times, by the way. Mostly the other side of the border, actually, in Mexico, but I've also spent time in Nogales, Arizona.
Oh, yeah, it was awesome. So growing up in upstate New York, you got the greenery, the water, the humidity, all of that stuff. And I remember stepping off the plane in Tucson in July of 99 like it was a convection oven. And I was like, where the hell am I? Like, there's no water. You just see this like brownish, reddish rock landscape. There's mountains in the distance. There's saguaro cactus and all that sort of stuff. And I remember the first time driving down Interstate 19 from Tucson to the border. It's about an hour drive. Like it's measured in kilometers. And it just seemed very foreign to me. Like my upbringing and where I lived a very sheltered life, and all of a sudden here I am, on the U.S. Mexico border. And as you come over one of the hills on I-19, you can see in the backdrop like this black line that kind of snakes across the horizon, and that was the border fence back then. And
then so you arrived. It's beautiful. By the way.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful part of the
Yep,
the
absolutely.
World. And so you arrived, and then did you have to go through training, or how
we
was
did?
That?
So we spent maybe like 3 days in Nogales, and then we flew out to Charleston, South Carolina, which is where at the time the Border Patrol had their satellite facility. So we were on an old naval base in North Charleston for about 6 months, from July until I think we graduated like right before Christmas of '99. Yeah.
And what were some of the first operations you were involved, or
at the academy?
No,
or
after
so
you came back from the academy.
Coming out, it was like I was full of piss and vinegar, and it was like, all right, let's get after. Like I was 22. I'm like, I want to get into some stuff.
Full of piss and vinegar. What is that? That means just like full of
just
adrenaline.
I wanted to get out. I wanted to like chase drug traffickers and human smugglers and all that sort of stuff, and
go after the bad guys.
I'll go after the bad guys 100%. And the field training officers were like, pump the brakes for a minute. Like there's more to it than that. I remember the first human smuggling load. I was with a field training officer named Terry, and we were sitting in his Chevy Tahoe overlooking a stretch of Interstate 19. And he was like, hey, I'm going to take a nap, but I want you to keep an eye on this little dirt road that pops out. And if you see any dust trail, wake me up, because it's going to be a human smuggling loan. So I'm sitting there with the binos like glued, and it was probably an hour, maybe an hour and a half, sure shit, here comes this dust trail. And I kind of nudged him, and I'm like, hey, I think there's a truck or something coming out of this little like ranch road. So he kind of just like stretches very nonchalant. He's like, all right, well, just tell me when you see it, when he hits the frontage road to go north. And that's one of the ways they circumvented the Interstate 19 checkpoint. So I'm looking at the binos, and sure enough, the binoculars. Yep. Here comes this little tan Chevy S10, and it hits the hard top and starts going north. And he just casually puts it in gear, and we go down the hill from where we were watching, and he gets behind it. And he's like, all right, I want you to look in the bed. And I'm like, okay. And he pulls up alongside, and I look over, the Chevy Tahoe is a little bit higher than the truck. And all I see are feet. I don't see anything else other than like feet. And I just remember saying like, I see a lot of feet, sir. And he's like, all right, I'm going to light it. I'm going to light it up. And he just said like, when they bail, grab 2. Now, I didn't know what that, I had no idea what he was talking about. Cause on my ride-alongs with my neighbor, everybody stopped. When I was doing all the traffic stops with the New York State Police troopers, like they always stopped. Right. So I'm like, what is he talking about? Bail. Yeah. So he turned on the red and blues, and the truck just sped up for maybe 100 yards, found a patch of dirt, and then ditched into the desert. And then the doors opened, people jumped out of the bed, just people running. How many people were there? There was probably 15, 12 to 15. Mostly men and women. Men and women. I don't remember any kids on that one. And I just remember thinking like, okay, grab 2. And he was going to get the driver. Right. And then for prosecution purposes, you need at least 2 material witnesses. So my job was that's why. My job was it wasn't about arresting the actual migrants. It was more about getting the witnesses to get the human trafficker behind bars. Okay. Yep. So your job was to get 2. Yeah. I got my 2. Terry didn't get the driver. Oh no. But that's okay. What happened to those 2? Back then they were taken to the station. They were processed, and back then it was called a VR, voluntary return. Mm-hmm. So if they were Mexican nationals that didn't have any significant criminal history in the States, they'd be allowed to essentially voluntarily return to Mexico, and they would be put on in a van and taken to the port of entry and allowed to walk back into Mexico. Did you have any situation where it got dangerous while you were doing some of these operations, trying to find some human traffickers? So it was like, there's always that sense of looking back on it. Yeah, I don't think you realize it at the time because it's exhilarating. It's fun. It's what I wanted to do. And you kind of don't really understand the danger aspect of it. Not that you get complacent, but it's just a matter of, it doesn't enter your mind all that often. Right. Until like one day, I was turning on they have these stadium lights along the border fence. So they illuminate the U.S. side of the fence. And there's kind of the sodium lights that you see in ball stadiums and stuff like that. But at dusk, you got to start them. And it's right, I'm talking probably like 10, 15 yards to the fence. And when you're trying to turn on those lights, you're focused on, just getting everything lined up and flipping switches and all that sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden you kind of hear like, shh, shh, and you're like, what is that? And it's people from the south side throwing rocks. Oh. And at dusk, you really can't see them, but you can hear them as they like sail by, or they'll hit a car behind you or bounce off the pavement. And that's where it's kind of like, oh shit. Like, yeah. Did that happen quite often? Happened more times than, it happened a lot. And did a lot of officers get hurt during those times? I don't remember anybody. So we were shown a lot of videos, and we were shown a lot of pictures about like what a rock will do to like the human body at speed. So we were told and trained, hey, if you're approaching the fence, if you're by yourself in the vicinity of the fence, you need to be cognizant of rockings and understand, like, if you take a rock to the head, you're going to be incapacitated. You have a gun, you have a radio, you have all these things, and it's going to be a few minutes before people can get to you. So it was ingrained in us to maintain kind of your situational awareness about everything. Yeah, because you guys weren't going there. You didn't have helmets at the time. It's not like the ICE agents that we're seeing right now out in the streets of America, right? You guys didn't have helmets. I had a baseball hat. Right. Yeah. I did a story, I think it was in 2014 actually, about this. I know you probably heard, and you might even have been somehow investigating this. I'm not sure, but the kid in Mexico, there was a lot of shootings of Border Patrol into Mexico, actually killing civilians in Mexico. And there was a kid, you remember? And that was Nogales. And there was a kid who was shot
and he was, I think, like 16 years old or something, had come from a basketball game with his brother.
I do remember that.
And he was shot by Border Patrol from across the border. He was in Mexico, and he was shot and killed. And we went and interviewed his parents. It was a very sad story, his brother. And what Border Patrol said, that the reason why they decided to shoot at these Mexican civilians in Mexico was because they were throwing rocks at them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing because, like, if you get hit or your partner or someone you're working with gets hit with a rock, then, you know, if they're incapacitated, you're incapacitated. Like, it could kill you. It could obviously seriously injure you. But at the same time, you know, you have to be cognizant of your backdrop. You have to understand, like, and a lot of times you don't see who's throwing the rocks, like an actual person. There's either a group of people or, like, you would just hear or see the rocks coming over the fence.
But you guys wouldn't be trained to shoot back.
You would have to have so it would be considered a deadly force. So, like, rocking incidents we were trained that is a deadly force situation.
In that case, you would probably be.
But you have to, only the individual can make that. Every situation's different, right? So while I was like, oh shit, I'm getting rocked, I can't see who's throwing them. I have no, like, visual target alignment or anything like that. I'm just not gonna clack off a couple rounds randomly to essentially, you know, disperse whoever's doing it. So there were shootings involving with rockings. A lot of them were when, like, they had one individual that they could identify that was throwing rocks. And you also got to be cognizant of shooting across international boundaries. And it's you know, that area along Nogales is fairly dense from businesses and homes and stuff like that. And, you know, a rifle round or even a handgun round is going to go several hundred yards. Yeah,
it's interesting to me that at the time it was such a big story all over. And we went and did a story, and it was it didn't look good on Border Patrol at the time. These agents were indiscriminately killing, you know, teenage Mexican kids across the border. And now we're talking about what's happening here in the United States.
Full circle.
Full circle. I mean, where they're doing it with American citizens here in America, but we'll get there in a second. Okay, so then, so that would happen quite often, that you guys would have rocks thrown at you guys from across.
It was it was always typically like in the night, like the swing shift. So as dusk was setting and you were turning on the lights, that's when I remember most of the rocking incidents happening. Like right as it was starting to get dark, because you can't really. It's hard to see exactly what's happening on the south side. The cameras aren't 100% dependable. So, you know, you could hear in your earpiece, like, hey, we've got a group south of whatever light you were trying to turn on, but they couldn't really see. So it was always like around that dusk time when stuff got kind of gnarly.
How long did you have this job for?
I was in the Border Patrol. I left the Border Patrol in September of 2001. So just over 2 years.
And you left. So, okay. And during that time, so you were there for 2 years, and was it mostly Mexican migrants, or who were you guys catching?
The vast majority were Mexican migrants. There was a portion that were, like, back then they would call them like OTMs, like other than Mexicans. So Central Americans, like from Guatemala, you know, Ecuador, Honduras, places like that. But the vast majority were either family units or single adult males coming from Mexico.
Was there ever sort of a violent encounter when you guys, were they ever armed? Was there ever like an armed confrontation between
not that I encounred.
Not at that time with you, I mean. Yeah,
most of the time they would run, and you would chase and you would try to apprehend who you could, and there's also that sense of humanity, right? So, like, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, Southern Arizona, especially in the summer, and you're pushing 100 degrees, like, you're making sure, like, people, you're offering water, or like if someone like fell and like broke their ankle or something like that at night, like, you're calling for medical and stuff like that. I never encountered any sort of violence in the Border Patrol other than the rocks.
Were there sort of militias at the time on the border?
The militia kind of phenomenon came
later,
a little bit later, kind of in like the 2005 they started showing up, and then definitely between like 2006, 2010.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then 2 years spent mainly on the border, and then Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security started, right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah.
I don't think most people know how or why the Department of Homeland Security was created.
So some of us still don't. Some of us still wonder. My first day in the Tucson field office was September 10th of 2001.
And it had just been created.
It hadn't even been created. Was my first day was the day before 9/11.
Oh, your first day was the day before 9/11. Okay, so you were just special agent within.
So it was the Treasury Department at the time. The U.S. Customs Service was part of the Treasury Department pre 9/11. So September 10th was my first day. I was supposed to get sworn in. The special agent in charge had something to do or a meeting, and I was going to be in the office all week because my academy class didn't start until the following Monday. So they were like, "No, hey, he'll get you tomorrow. We'll get you sworn in tomorrow." And then
it was 9/11.
It was 9/11. Yeah.
And what happened after that?
I remember going to the office that morning. Actually, I remember I was putting on my tie and it was draped over my neck, and I had the TV on, and you could see the smoke billowing out of the World Trade Tower, and it was obvious like something bad happened. And then the news crew, it was that scene from a helicopter, and then you just see kind of this plane coming across the horizon, and it kind of disappears behind the buildings for a second, and then it hits the second tower. And then at that point, you're like, you just know life's never going to be the same. And this is before even knowing about the Pentagon and Shanksville and all that sort of stuff.
Right. And at that point, I mean, you're seeing this and you're realizing the world's going to be different, but you don't even know how different it's going to be for you, right? Because then you suddenly are sort of were transferred, or the department you work with, then the agency you work within gets sort of put into a new
exactly
department.
So that all 2001 happens, or 9/11 happens. I flew out to the academy Friday morning, which I think was like 24 hours after the airspace had been opened. And I just remember there being like 3 people on the flight. The flight attendants are crying. It was just super somber. You get to FLETC and they're doing 100% inspections on all vehicles. They have the staggered jersey barriers so people can't ram the gate, and you're just like what is happening?
Yeah, it's like a war zone.
Graduate the academy, and then in early 2002, and then the Homeland Security Act of 2002 is really what created today's Department of Homeland Security. So it took different agencies from primarily the Justice Department and the Treasury Department and combine them into this massive conglomerate that is now DHS.
And the idea behind it is because nobody saw, or almost no one saw 9/11 coming, and they thought that it was a huge failure of law enforcement, and that basically all these agencies weren't talking to each other. So we needed to put some of these agencies that are tasked with protecting the homeland together under this big umbrella, right? So it includes Border Patrol, ICE as we know it nowadays, TSA, FEMA, Secret Services, right? It became sort of mushroom into a gigantic agency.
Yes.
Right? That didn't, or department actually, that didn't exist before.
Correct.
How was it when you were there at the beginning? How did you see that transformation, and how did it affect you?
It was a mess.
Was it?
Yeah, it was a complete shit show. To the point where, and I understand now, looking back, the massive restructuring. I think it's probably the largest restructuring in the federal government since World War II. And you're talking about equipment and budgets and personnel, and we had to turn in our phones. We had I'm going to date myself, but we still had pagers in 2002 and kind of the brick cell phones.
Yeah.
We had to turn all those in. You were given one cell phone per group. And that was only for duty calls when you were like on duty. So this is before, iPhones and social media and all that sort of stuff. So it was like 2002 to 2004 was an absolute disaster. You were condensing the INS special agents,
which was Immigration and
Naturalization Service, with the customs special agents. They had different systems. They had different like emails and group supervisors and chains of command. And even at one point, there was a special agent in charge in Phoenix. There was a special agent in charge in Tucson. And now I'm back dealing with, illegal aliens and things like that. But like, we didn't have the computer systems or any of the infrastructure to do it. And Border Patrol was like, nope, we're not helping you anymore. Like, you're on your own. And there were a lot of growing pains.
Did you think at the time that it was a good idea though? Because obviously there was no communication within the agencies that, we have to change something here.
I think people understood that there was an intelligence failure and agencies did not communicate between the intelligence community agencies, some of the Justice Department agencies, and Treasury agencies. I think it was probably done in haste as a reassurance to the American public that the government was doing something to prevent another 9/11. That was really the foundation for why the department was created. You could certainly pick it apart and digest if it made structural and organizational sense to put it together the way that it is today.
And a lot of people are asking the same questions right now, right? It's
23 years later. Yeah.
And then is this when the hiring surge started?
So, yes. So the hiring surge, the post 9/11 hiring surge really started in the Border Patrol. So the Border Patrol was given a ton of money to, secure the southern border. And they were mandated with whatever the congressional mandates were to hire as many, whatever the agent numbers that they had to meet. And what that did was it ballooned their ranks. ICE is in its infancy, and we're still trying to work through the merger of customs and INS personnel. And the Border Patrol is just going on a spending spree and a hiring spree. What happens, and I think it's relevant today, because what happens when you do that is your standards get lowered, your vetting is not thorough, and even in normal situations, there are going to be people that are hired that are probably a bad fit for the job. But in those mass buildups, it happens much more frequently. So you end up with massive misconduct issues, corruption issues. They actually had to stand up a whole nother organization, Customs and Border Protection, Office of Professional Responsibility, to deal with the issues that were now plaguing the Border Patrol and the CBP inspectors that you see like at airports and land borders.
I mean, and this obviously could not be more relevant to what's happening nowadays. And I think some of the numbers are staggering. I was reading this, and I'm sure you know this, but I don't think most people do. There was an amazing journalist out there called Garrett Graff, who's sort of an expert on this. He's been writing about these issues for a long time. He has an amazing newsletter called Doomsday Scenario that I encourage everybody to subscribe. But he basically, in one of his latest articles, talks about how criminality is so rampant inside the CBP that it has seen one of its agents or officers arrested every 24 to 36 hours since 2005. So in the last 20 years, at least 4,913 CBP officers and Border Patrol agents have been arrested, some multiple times. And this is the craziest part, is that this crime rate is higher per capita than the crime rate of undocumented immigrants in the United States.
Yeah. And it's not, it's also not confined to just CBP. I'm still trying to process that figure you just read, because I wrapped up my career with the internal affairs apparatus of ICE, and I couldn't imagine that pace of criminal misconduct by personnel.
And these are CBP's own numbers, by the way, because they actually have sort of keep track of those numbers, which is not the case with ICE, which is another agency within Homeland Security, but they don't actually keep track of those numbers. So it is impossible to know exactly what happens with ICE. But there was a hiring surge with ICE as well, and with what we're seeing, and we'll talk about this, but with what we're seeing and how they're responding to these protesters, and it doesn't seem like these are well-trained people who should be doing this kind of job, right?
There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll get there. Okay. But tell me, these numbers are freaking crazy. And you worked, when you at one point, you were actually involved in the internal investigations, right?
Correct.
Internal investigations. So you would be looking at some of these crime numbers, right?
For the ICE side of the house, yes. I was internal.
At ICE.
At ICE.
Not at CBP.
Correct.
Okay, yep. So that's great for our conversation. But tell me a little bit how that. So, Homeland Security was created. You were sort of moved and became more of a special agent. What was your career path?
So, when ICE was created, really the focus in Southern Arizona, kind of between 2002 and 2006-ish, was really twofold. Mm-hmm. It was international drug smuggling mm-hmm. and international human smuggling. Mm-hmm. And kind of the mantra was humans and dope comes north, money and guns go south. So there was also a focus on both cash smuggling and weapons smuggling, leaving the U.S. into Mexico. Mm-hmm. So I spent the first 3 years of my career assigned to DEA and just had a blast. Still friends with a lot of those guys. We did a ton of wire cases, buy busts, where an undercover would buy 5-10 kilos of cocaine and you would arrest the trafficker that supplied the coke. And then I started getting in. I really wanted to get into more like complex criminal investigations. Mm-hmm. So we did. I was actually introduced to a human source through an AUSA, an assistant U.S. attorney out there who was working with ATF, and this particular individual was intertwined with the Sinaloa Cartel that was controlling the Caborca Sonora Plaza.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So,
yeah.
And there's a long-standing history with Caborca going back to like Rafael Caro Quintero and stuff. He's kind of really the one that founded that mm-hmm. that group.
Rafael Caro Quintero, by the way, was a huge drug lord. He was extradited to the U.S. He's now like 80 years old.
He's up
or
there.
Something.
He was extradited like 2 years ago.
He was part of the Sinaloa Cartel, but he's one of sort of the OGs of drug trafficking in Mexico.
Yeah, and instrumental in the death of DEA agent Kiki Camarena back in '85, yeah. And he was in Mexican prison for a long time, and then was let out, mm-hmm. and then. Anyways,
did you consult for Narcos, by the way?
I did not. No.
Did you watch it?
I did. I love it. I've watched it multiple times.
And it's
so great,
so real, right?
It is.
Yeah, it's really true to what happened. Or very similar to what happened. Yeah, go ahead.
Very, very solid storyline.
Yeah.
So there was a family, the Pai Soto family, mm-hmm. Ignacio, Octavio, and Trinidad were three brothers that kind of came up through Rafael and his brother Miguel. Rafael gets arrested, Miguel gets arrested and extradited, and they turn over the Caborca cartel to these three brothers. And they controlled a lot of the smuggling in southern Arizona. So marijuana, cocaine. There really wasn't large ports of entry because Nogales is its own corridor, and that's controlled by guy's name's Sergio mm-hmm. Valenzuela. So anyways, that's now, I forget who it was back then, but the Pai Soto family controls Caborca, and they just smuggle staggering amounts of marijuana, cocaine through the vast desert, basically in southern Arizona. Mm-hmm. And this human source, arguably the most interesting guy I've ever met, very down to earth, but also real with who he was. Like, he was like, I'm a doper and I'm a criminal, and that's me. Yeah. And we got along for years, and we got to do some.
So wait, so he was a confidential informant for you?
He was,
and he was a Mexican guy.
He was.
Okay.
Yeah. He would text me, Christmas time and stuff like that, Merry Christmas, and Tucson's a small town. Like, I would be out with my wife, we would see him.
No way.
Yeah, he'd casually come over and like bump me a little bit or something like that, just to kind of like say hello.
God,
just
crazy.
a really unique individual.
Did you meet him? Did you arrest him first, and then he became a confidential?
No, so I met him. He had ATF had a case on him, a minor case for like a weapons charge, and when they were talking to him, he started talking about the Paisoto family and the Caborca corridor and stuff like that. And the AUSA, who I was working with at the time, a guy named Dave, basically said, hey, this dovetails into everything that you're doing in this little town called Arivaca, which is kind of southwest of Tucson. So it was through that introduction that I got introduced to him.
And so the idea was that he was going to give you information on the three brothers and the Caborca.
And he did for years. So we actually built so Octavio was killed in 2004.
One of the brothers.
One of the brothers by his nephew. And this is where like the family tree gets a little complicated. So then Octavio gets killed. Ignacio, who goes by Nacho, takes over. We ended up building a case on Nacho. In 2009, he gets arrested by the Mexicans, and we were planning on submitting like the extradition package and all that sort of stuff. And then he gets released. Ooh. Again, similar to like an RC Rafael Carl Quintero, right?
Because he was also arrested and then released before you could get the extradition.
So he was Nacho.
A lot of cases, it's because of corruption, by the way.
Right, and Nacho was sentenced to 20 years.
Oh wow!
So we're like, all right, like
we have time.
And then he gets released. And then he goes back, he's controlling the plaza, and December 26th of 2020, he takes 50 rounds while he's sitting in his...
Of 2020 or 2010?
2020, he gets killed.
Oh, now?
Yeah.
Just recently?
Like 6 years ago.
Oh, shit.
So day after Christmas, 2020, in Caborca, which is a town he controlled, like ran the plaza for. I think he gets hit 52 times. His wife and 8-month-old daughter are in the car. His daughter takes a round in the arm, survives. His wife survives. He's dead. And
somebody else took over the cartel.
So then there's this infighting, and this is kind of when like a lot of the like Chapo's been extradited at this point. There's a lot of infighting between different factions of the Sinaloa Cartel, like between the Salazars and the Paisoto family for control of this pretty lucrative corridor.
So they built the Paisoto family, the three brothers, controlled the Caborca, but they were working with the Sinaloa Cartel.
Correct. Yeah.
Were they part of the Sinaloa Cartel?
They were. So they were very much aligned with. They were Mayo's guys. So
they were Mayo's guys.
They were Mayo's guys. Obviously, Chapo had a big play in that. So yes, they were aligned with both of them. And actually, like Mayo and Chapo would, when the Beltran-Leyva wars kicked off several years prior, they would send reinforcements in. Caborca was kind of contested territory for a bit, and they would send in reinforcements to make sure, like, BLO didn't come in and take over.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, El Mayo was the other head of the Sinaloa Cartel. It was El Mayo and El Chapo. They sort of founded the cartel together and have been running it until the extradition of El Chapo, where his sons took over. And then most recently, last year, with El Mayo being brought to the United States to face justice as well, which we can get a little bit into that later. But wait, so you were working on this case, and were you ever able to make any arrests of any of the top guys here, or did this help you get to?
So this was like a leg in to. So what we really did was focus on the plot, what they call like the plaza bosses. So the representatives of, like, and it was all factions of the Sinaloa Cartel. So essentially like Miles Zambada and Chapo Guzmán along that stretch of border in Arizona. So you had like the Sonoita Plaza to the west, the Caborca Plaza, then you have like the Nogales Plaza. And that's all controlled, albeit not always amicably or peacefully, by factions of the Sinaloa Cartel. So we ended up, Nacho gets killed. His neighbor to the west is a guy named, he goes by El Memo. His name's Adelmo Nieblas Gonzalez. He controlled everything from basically like the west desert of Arizona all the way out to Yuma. And we did build a case on him, and we ended up getting him indicted. The Mexicans were able to arrest him, and he was sitting in a not Altiplano but another prison outside of Culiacan, and in 2014 escaped through a tunnel. Also through a tunnel.
It seems like every single drug lord in Mexico eventually gets arrested and eventually escapes through tunnels. Yeah. It was what happened with El Chapo also. Correct. In 2014, 15?
He escaped in
15, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually we did a story. I want to hear about how you got involved in the El Chapo wiretaps. Let's start there, and then I'll tell you my story. Okay. How I ended up chasing El Chapo in Sinaloa myself.
Okay. Now I'm interested. So that stuff wraps up. Memo escapes. I take a new position back down in Nogales in 2012, which is where I started my career. Nogales, you've been there. It's a very busy and very vibrant border city, right? Yeah. So there's constant trade and people coming and going back and forth. It was very vibrant back and forth. So 2012, I get back to Nogales, and it's changed a lot. So, a lot of those places, some of those places have been burnt. The Arizona to Mexico traffic subsided quite a bit. At the time, BlackBerry Messenger was kind of like a chat app that was kind of affixed to the BlackBerry device. So we were all familiar with it. We started legally intercepting wires, like the communications, sometime early 2013. And as we're going through, you're seeing all the communications about drug trafficking.
And you were listening to the conversation, but you were also seeing the texts back and forth.
This was only text, so there was no voice. Listening. So you have to explain to a judge exactly what you want to intercept and the reasons for it. It's understandably there's a lot of oversight and checks and balances.
Right. And I'm assuming also they're not saying cocaine and kill people. They're using code words for all of this.
So the crazy thing is they absolutely were. So they were not talking in code. We would intercept pictures of just bales of cocaine, and they'd be like, hey, take care of this guy, take care of that guy. So-and-so's got to go. Kill. Yeah, kill.
God, that's crazy. And in those situations, you would actually contact those people or figure out.
We would have to show. Yes, we sent guys to Guatemala, to a Guatemalan prison, to make a notification.
Wow,
our guys had to go down to a Guatemalan prison to notify a relative of El Chapo that he was going to get killed. Wow. By El Chapo. Wow. And he didn't believe us.
No way.
He didn't. No.
And was he killed?
He wasn't killed so Chapo had his own problems immediately after that. So he's not killed by El Chapo. He's at a Christmas party in Mexico, gets pissed drunk, and gets into a fight with another relative who ends up shooting and killing him. So he ended up getting killed, just not the way we warned him he was going to be.
See, in those situations, when you're going to go to all this, you're actually putting your own investigation at risk, right? By telling somebody that they can be killed, because how would you know this information unless you're tapping into their phones? But I guess that is the humane thing to do. And I'm glad you did. It's the
obligation. I mean, it really, that's the obligation of U.S. law enforcement. That's every wire I've ever done. Your prosecutors tell you, hey, if there's a viable threat to life, then we need to do everything we can. Our job is not to allow people to get killed. So
it's good to know that that's still the goal that you guys have. Nice. Okay. So then, and then how did that get you to? And is that what eventually got you to El Chapo himself?
Partly.
So at this point, just to remind our listeners and viewers, but El Chapo was the most wanted man, wasn't he, on America's list?
I believe he was the second most wanted man behind, at the time, al-Zawahiri, who was the leader of Al-Qaeda.
Al-Qaeda. Yeah. Wow. That is crazy. Were you so excited? Were you jumping up and down?
We were, yes. So there's obviously that sense of we're on, this is potentially monumental.
Just again, this has been sort of, he had escaped from prison so this was what year?
This would have been the end of 2013, fall of 2013.
Right. And he had escaped from prison, I think the first time was in 2006 or something. It was
So it was 11 years prior. I think he was on the run 2014, 11 years. So it would have been 2003-ish.
So the first time he escaped from prison was in 2001. Okay, 2001. So at this point it was 12 it was 2013, years. So 12 years. So he'd been on the run for 12 years and nobody knew or could catch him, right? And so suddenly you guys have you're a step closer than anyone else out there in finding out exactly where he is and in catching him, right?
Absolutely. And so the other crazy thing is, like, you look at like DEA and FBI in these, like, in New York and LA, Chicago, like the agents that were putting this together were like a year out of the academy from HSI and based in Nogales.
Oh, wow.
So everybody, and I got along great with the Bureau guys and DEA, and they were like, dude, how the hell did you guys end up in this? Yeah. And we were just kind of like, I don't really know. Like, it just kind of materialized, and now it was, okay, can we capitalize on because he's in Mexico. He controls large swaths of Mexico. He has a tremendous amount of counterintelligence and counter-surveillance apparatuses that tell him movements of Mexican military units and police and things like that. So, okay, it's great that he's on the other end of the line, but how do you actually get to him?
Right. We know what he's saying or what he's writing, but how do we actually know how to get to him?
Two completely different things. Right. So it's like,
and how did you?
So we actually so DEA was involved in all this from the beginning, and DEA was basically like, hey, we need to bring SEMAR in to this, the Mexican Marines, and they had some success in some high value target operations in Mexico, and the Marines were kind of viewed as the capable organization. So I remember being at the embassy in Mexico City and doing all these briefings and plans and stuff like that, and it was still a little bit of like an unsure thing. If we said anything, would we get compromised? Yeah. And I wasn't at this particular meeting, but the lead case agent was, and there was an admiral who went by El Lobo, and he basically told the guys, like, knock the shit off. Who are you? Is this Chapo? And they were like, yeah. And they was like, listen, I want you to understand something. Like, he's been a scourge on my country. The last time we went after him, I lost 12 Marines. Like, got emotional. Wow. And he was like, I'll commit to doing this. And at that point, you gotta just take a leap. And to his credit, he did. He would put out kind of almost like misinformation, like, hey, we're gonna go to La Paz, or we're gonna be in Topolobampo, which are, La Paz is Baja California, and Topolobampo is in Sinaloa, and just see like what we would intercept about those movements to try to isolate any sort of leaks he had in the organization.
Wow. So he was committed. I mean, he wasn't compromised. Like, unfortunately, a lot of people in Mexico's government are. El Lobo. So this was the wolf, right?
Yep. And I think he recently retired. Yeah.
And then how did you guys get to El Chapo that first time?
So the first time, we knew.
So you kept giving information.
We did, yeah. And so I was in Arizona. We put a team with DEA and some U.S. Marshals with SEMAR in Mexico, and we would provide them essentially real-time information. And we knew at that point, like, Chapo didn't have an entourage. He didn't have like a 200-man army. He wasn't shutting down restaurants and stuff like he had done in the past. He was trying to keep a low profile and rolling pretty light. But he had a cook. He had like kind of a courier that would run errands and stuff like that for him. So we focused on the courier, and there was some communication where he made a comment. The courier made a comment like, "Hey, I'm gonna drop off breakfast early, and I'm gonna go someplace else." So the assessment was that he was gonna deliver Chapo food. So we were like, all right, now we gotta find him in the middle of Culiacan in the middle of the night.
Find the courier. So you figured out where Chapo was.
And they did.
They did.
So they were able to locate him on a street. They approached him. He was actually like, he didn't fight, he didn't run, he didn't pull a gun, and he broke. And he showed him the house.
Where he was.
Yeah, where he was going.
Where El Chapo was.
Chapo was.
And then what happened then?
They couldn't get through the front door because he had reinforced. So identify the house. Samar and the Marines prep an assault plan, and they don't have some of the more sophisticated breaching tools that U.S. law enforcement and U.S. military have. So they had a makeshift ram and a sledgehammer, which may work fine for the majority of the houses, but this particular house, which was his ex-wife Griselda's, had like a steel-plated door with like a water bladder in between. So as they were just wailing on the door, like it was absorbing all that energy. So created a ton of noise.
And he escaped, right?
And he escaped.
He escaped through the bathtub.
Through the
right?
bathtub, which we knew about.
Yeah, I filmed outside this house. I remember that.
We knew they had a bathtub because they got scared a day or two prior and said flatten the bathtub and leave in the Jetta.
Right.
So
it was an amazing contraption where the bathtub would go up, right, and he had access to a tunnel, and then he went through the sort of sewage tunnels.
The sewer system.
The sewer system, of Culiacan, and went into a car and fled. And then,
so he gets picked up. He gets taken down to Mazatlan, which is like a 2-3 hour drive straight south, and we didn't know that at the time. So I asked. The guy's name is Jake. I'm like, hey, what are you guys gonna do? Like, I figured, like, hey, we literally got to the front door, and some things are just out of your control. Like, there's nothing you can do. Like,
were you so frustrated? That were you?
It was like devastating to some degree, but I was also like incredibly proud because like the men and women that really were not viewed as like the ones that would catch Chapo, like they got to the front. I remember having a meeting. I'm like, listen, I am so proud of you guys. Like, we got to the front door. Like, nobody else did. We got him on the other end of the phone. And sometimes shit happens. There's nothing you can do about it.
That's very sweet. It's like a coach's talk with the team after they lost, but they tried their everything.
And then that same guy, Jack, who I actually intervened in a rocking situation from the Border Patrol like 14 years prior. That's how I first met him.
Wait, who's Jack again?
So, sorry, I didn't mean to jump around. So Jack was the one that put the pieces together that Chapo was on the other end of the device. So Jack and I started out in the Border Patrol together, and I actually helped him out of a rocking situation that we talked about earlier. That's how I met him.
That's how you met.
Yeah,
the rock situation. Rock. I thought you were saying
rock,
Rocky.
like rocks coming over the border.
Wow. So he was younger than you.
He was a little younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah. And then so he comes to me and says, "Hey, he's in Mazatlan. Chapo's in Mazatlan."
He figured out also through the communications.
And I'm like, how do you know that? And then he kind of laid it out for me. So he's like, he's in Mazatlan, and his bodyguard took him there. I'm like, how do you know this? And we've been up for like 3 days straight and just trying to do all this. And he's like, he pieced it together, and I'm like, okay, I believe you, but I'm not the one that needs to be convinced. We still need to convince Samar to move out of Culiacan, go down to Mazatlan. And essentially, this is like February, and Mazatlan's a pretty big tourist destination, and we suspected Chapo was in a high rise near the beach, and Samar was like, "We can handle Culiacan, but if there's a full blown gun battle in Mazatlan
tourist hub,
that's a bad day." Yeah. But they, to their credit, they did. They're like, "All right, we'll do it." Yeah. So the team on the ground identified the Miramar Hotel. It's like a 10, 11-story high rise.
Filmed outside of that too.
Oh, did you? Yeah,
I know exactly which hotel it is. Yeah.
So, but they didn't know what room. They knew he was there, but they didn't know what room he was in. So, again, I wasn't on the ground, but the version I was told was early one morning they went in, and the front desk manager, they were like, "Hey, like, where is he?" And the guy was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And they were like, "Wrong answer." So the night manager basically said, "Hey, there was a guy that came in a wheelchair a couple days ago. I haven't seen him, but he's in this room." I think it was like 402. So they went up. Samar breached the door. Chapo and Emma, his wife, are in bed. Chapo jumps out. He grabs like a rusty or some sort of AR-15 or rifle, goes into the bathroom. One of the Samar commanders basically says, "Kill him." And Emma starts screaming like, "Don't kill him!" Not in front of he has two twins who were like 4 or 5 at the time. not in front of the kids, not in front of the kids. They give him like one chance. They're like, Chapo, come out. And they see his hands kind of come out of the door, and he's got no shirt on, and they cuff him. They whisk him down to the parking garage at the hotel, and it's kind of that picture that got passed around where there's like a hand over his like hairline. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then they told you, what was your reaction then? At this
like
point?
I knew what was going on at the Miramar, but you're not getting any updates. And then Jake sent me and the whole like Arizona team a text, and it just says, "We got him, boys. We got him."
Wow.
With the picture.
Were you so happy?
Yeah, I was like, holy shit. At the time, I'm like, holy shit. But then at the same time, I'm like, I've got to like I know Jake, I know his family, like all this sort of stuff. Like he's kind of in the lion's den here. Like great that they got him, but we still got to get him home. And so they loaded Chapo in a couple Blackhawks. They flew to a military base. And then from there, they took Chapo to Mexico City. And then DEA, I booked Jake a flight from Mazatlan direct to Phoenix, and DEA made sure like basically walked him onto the plane
to come back here.
Home. Yeah.
Oh. And then Chapo went to Altiplano prison outside of Mexico City, high security prison. And it was like a couple of years later that he managed to escape that as well. Yeah.
So all that happens, like it's kind of crazy and chaotic, but they're still trying to put the evidence together and all this. So like now they're doing the actual investigative work. The manhunt's over, and now they're putting together, where is he going to be tried? Is he going to be extradited? So they're helping out on all that. I had transferred to DC. Other people had kind of moved around a little bit because it's the federal government, and that's kind of how it progresses. And then one Saturday morning in 2015, 16, I get it. I wake up and my phone is just blowing up. And one of the guys, Gabe, is like, he's gone. I was like, who's gone? Like I thought like somebody died, like from our group or something. I'm like, who's gone? And he's just like, JGL, Joaquin Guzmán, right? And I was like, I'm like, there's no way. And he starts sending links. I turn on the TV and it's all over the news. Like, Chapo Guzmán escapes maximum security prison.
It was crazy. The videos were insane. Essentially, the massive undertaking. They built a huge tunnel under the prison that would go from quite a few miles, right?
Yeah,
a few miles outside of the prison under his
shower stall.
Yeah. A huge hole there that nobody could see, and then he just disappeared.
Yeah,
the
there's that
guards
video.
Go in and he's not there. Go ahead.
And
there's that video.
There's that video where he kind of walks around. It's from the prison, like from his cell, and he sits on the bed. He puts on shoes. You can see him tying his shoes, and then he goes around this little half wall that separates, like the toilet area and stuff, and he's gone. Yeah. There's a little like a towel falls over, and like that's it, and he's gone.
Were you so mad after
I was just
all the work you put into it?
I mean, part of it, you're just kind of like, you got to be kidding me, and then part of it's like pissed off. You're like this is a slap in the face to not just U.S. law enforcement, but like the Mexican Marines put like their own men at risk. They have to live in that environment and constantly looking over their back. Like people were pissed. And I remember my boss, who was in Arizona when we captured him, and him and I are now in DC together. And he's like, "Hey, Eric, what do you think?" And I remember telling him, like, "Scott, you gotta get the band back together. Like there's only a handful of people in federal law enforcement that have the corporate knowledge of this guy, and a good chunk of them happen to be in DC, and Ray, who was the initial point of contact I had with DEA, was also he was with DEA in Virginia too. So they got the band back together. We're like, let's do it again.
These are the only people that can actually catch this guy again. And so that started your investigation, is trying to find him again. And it is interesting because I think it's at that time you were actively looking for him. Well, I was too.
Maybe we crossed paths.
So I found out I'd been to Sinaloa a few times before. I'd reported on drug trafficking there. Obviously, was very aware of who Chapo was, and then I found out that he had fled Altiplano, and I had this idea like, I know one of my very good friends is a journalist fixer in Mexico who, in Sinaloa, actually grew up in Sinaloa. He's any journalist that wants to do a story about Sinaloa, they contact this guy, amazing guy, Miguel Angel Vega. And so I called up Miguel and I was like, Miguel, what is happening, dude? Like they fled. Everybody's saying he's in Sinaloa for sure. He's the most wanted man in the world right now, and I think we should do a story about what the hunt for El Chapo looks like. What does the hunt for the most wanted man in the world look like? So I basically flew to Sinaloa, met Miguel in Culiacan, and we started the journey. Me, Miguel, Alex, and Pete, part of our team, all the way to where his mom lived because she passed away a couple of years ago. Which was a 2-day journey out into the off-roads. We had Miguel's brother's SUV that eventually actually broke down. But we had at some point, it was so off-road that we were going through rivers and water up until middle of the car. We had to stay overnight in one of the towns. When people would ask us what we were doing, we would say that we're going up to visit El Chapo's mother. And we get warnings, but most of all, it was interesting because there's just such a, more than fear, there's an enormous admiration and almost love for El Chapo in that part of the world, right? Because this is a man, they see the government as having abandoned them. There's no programs to help the people of the mountains, the Sierra Madre Mountains in Mexico. There's a lot of poverty. And here's a drug lord and an organization, the Sinaloa Cartel, that actually helps the poor and cares about what happens to them. That's how they see it. So there's a lot of reverence for El Chapo, and that's what we saw everywhere. And I remember when we finally arrived in the town, it was crazy. The mother's house it's one of the first things you see when you arrive in the town because it's it's the biggest house in town, and it's right on the top of the hill. But we arrived, and one of the things that shocked us is that the hunt for the most wanted man in the world didn't seem to be a hunt because we saw no one. We thought we're not actually going to be able to get there because either we're stopped by the military that are in pursuit of El Chapo, or we'll be stopped by the cartel themselves where they'll tell us, where do you think you're going? Go back to where you came from. But none of that happened. So we kept on going further and further and further. We were never stopped. Eventually we get to the town. And there's just there's 2 or 3 military guys. We actually have it on film. And they asked, what are you guys doing here? And we said, we've come to talk to La Mama, to the mother of El Chapo. And again, even from the military guys there was reverence. And they did the go ahead, saluted us and said, oh yeah, El Señor, called him El Señor. Oh yes, please go ahead if you want to go. El Señor, and let us go. And we went all the way up and we knocked on the mother's house. And then these guys, not very nice looking guys, showed up with armed, obviously, lots of weapons. It was 2 or 3 guys, and they had walkie-talkies on them. And they asked us, we said, we just want to talk to the mother. We want to interview the mother of El Chapo and see how she's doing. And they said, no, I'm sorry, you can't. And they weren't being very helpful. And we thought, okay, we can't leave. We've spent 48 hours in a car, in dangerous territory to get here. We can't just leave. So we thought, okay, let's just go around town and see if we can talk to other people. So our first stop was at the church because we knew there's a church just a block from the mother's house that was built by El Chapo for the mother who's very religious. And we stopped at the church, and the wife of the priest was there. And the priest or the pastor wasn't there at the time, but the wife was there. Very sweet lady, offered us sandwiches. We were starving. And then as we were talking to her, this guy comes in a 4x4 and points to Pete, who happens to be the tallest guy holding a camera, but who also happens to be the only one that doesn't speak a word of Spanish. And they said, okay, you come with me. And Pete looks at us like, what? He's like, yeah, you come with me. What shall I do? And I start saying, sorry, I know it's strange, but I'm actually the boss. So you want to take me, and I speak Spanish. He doesn't speak Spanish. You don't want to take him. Miguel, by the way, my journalist friend, Mexican friend, was also trying to make the case that they should take him and not Pete. So we were both basically fighting for the chance to go in this 4x4 because we wanted to see. I knew they weren't going to kill us, I didn't think so. I thought that they wanted to actually introduce us to the mother or somebody in the cartel. So it was a great moment, right? And then Pete just looks at us, and they're insisting, no, it has to be him. The boss said it had to be him. And I looked at Pete, and he said, what would you do in my place, Mariana? And I said, look, Pete, I'm dying to go. So if it were me, I would go, but I can't tell you what to do. And Pete says, okay, I'll go. Jumps into the 4x4, starts going. This is like one of those quad bikes.
Yeah.
Starts going, and we just see Pete like disappearing, looking at us with a smile, kind of nervous. And then the three of us, Miguel, me, and Alex, looking at each other, thinking, "What the heck did we just do?" We broke number one rule in journalism in situations like this, where you never separate the team, right? And who knows? Now he's not. We have no control over what happens with him. So we turned to the lady, the wife of the pastor. And we asked her, "What do you think they're going to kill him? What's happened?" He says, "Oh no, they're very good people, muy buenas personas. They're not going to hurt him. Don't worry." Anyway, Pete comes down after 20 minutes. We're so happy, and he says essentially, they want to pay. They want money. They said they'll let you interview the mother if you pay. And I said, "Okay, I can negotiate the pay. So please take me this time." So this time they took us all up to meet the rest of the group, again, a bunch of armed men, and they got me on the phone. And till this day, Miguel and I think that it was one of the sons of El Chapo. We believe it was actually Ivan. Spoke very well English, great English, and basically told me, mi hija, called me mi hija, if you want to interview, you have to pay. And I explained, look, as a journalist, we don't pay for interviews. And then initially he was very nice, and then he got pissed when I said, "I'm sorry, but we are not going to pay." And he said, "Well, if you're not going to pay, you have exactly 10 minutes to leave my town, or else I'm going to send my men after you." Wow. And that was it. Wow. That was it. We left as fast as possible.
I don't blame you on that one.
But we did a story about this at the time I was working at Fusion. And the story came out, and it was, I don't know, like a half-hour film called Chasing El Chapo. And the idea was we went to look for what the chase for El Chapo looked like, but how it was virtually non-existent in the place where everybody thought El Chapo was hiding, which turned out to be the case. He was hiding right there. Yes, it's just outside. We went to La Tuna, but he was hiding outside La Tuna. So then Sean Penn goes and meets El Chapo, but not only meets El Chapo, talks to El Chapo about the story that I had done, about how he said, "El Chapo, you are famous. There's a story now running in American television where they came and tried to look for you. So tell me about your involvement with the Sean Penn and how that actually led to the arrest of El Chapo
Sean
again."
Penn. I don't know.
Sean Penn.
Yeah. So we did, the assessment was that he was in the mountains and trying to pinpoint exactly where. And Jake came to me one day. Jake was the agent that kind of spearheaded a lot of this. Came to me and said, "I've got him. They're going to meet him." And I was annoyed. I'm like, who's going to meet? Like, what are you talking about? He's like, "Bro, Kate Del Castillo and Sean Penn." I'm like, and we had known that Chapo was really fixated on having a biopic made of his life, even prior to the 2014 capture. And he had pitched it to people in Los Angeles and some fairly well-known names, and they all passed.
I would have said yes in a second.
So we should have told them. I'm like, "Hey, go see Mariana." And so he's like, "Yes, Sean Penn, Kate Del Castillo, they're on a chartered flight to Guadalajara." Mm-hmm. And from there, the assessment was that he would be picked up. Chapo had a couple trusted pilots that they would be picked up and flown to the Sierra, into the mountains, to wherever he was. So DEA was like, "Look, we could probably get some of the Guadalajara guys to do some surveillance, but don't have high expectations." And sure enough, there was some surveillance of Penn and Del Castillo in Guadalajara, and then they lost them.
Can you backtrack a little bit for me? How did Jake even find out that they were going to visit him? How did that even...
So Chapo had a fixation with Kate Del Castillo.
Yeah.
So
who's, by the way, a Mexican actress who was in a bunch of very well-known soap operas, and he was very beautiful.
Yes. So
he loves beautiful women.
Fixated, and I think she had made some positive social media posts about him or something, and so we started kind of looking at that angle again, and we saw that Kate Del Castillo and Sean Penn were on a flight out of LA to Guadalajara. And it only made sense. And this is after he escaped Altiplano.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, look, he knows that the clock is ticking and he wants this biopic to be made. How Sean Penn, we didn't know at the time. I'm like, where does Sean Penn fit into this? Nobody really knew.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew who the pilot was. So we focused on the pilot.
Huh. How did you know who the pilot was?
Because Chapo only had a few trusted pilots. One was in custody, and only left like 2 out there. And we thought that it was either going to be one of his sons or this trusted pilot or a combination of both that would take him. And It ended up being this pilot flew him from Guadalajara into the mountains. And because we knew who that pilot was, we were able to identify the mountain property. We have Sean Penn and Kate Del Castillo in Guadalajara. We knew they were being flown out by a trusted pilot. We didn't know where.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, sorry, you were talking about how you figured out which pilot it was.
Which pilot, right? Yeah. And I'm pretty sure the guy went by El 17, El-17. And he was going to fly him out to meet the man, Chapo. So we identified this property in the mountains, and we knew that the pilot had gone there. We presumed that Penn and Del Castillo were there. So we're like, there's only one reason that they're there. Chapo may not have been staying there, but he's likely that he's going to be brought there.
Mm-hmm. So what tell me if I'm wrong, but what I had heard was that it was finding out that Sean Penn first was flown when he was flown to Mexico. He was flown to where? To Guadalajara.
Guadalajara, yeah.
So the fact that Sean Penn was flying to Guadalajara in an undisclosed or like sort of looked like a secretive mission, and that Kate Del Castillo was there as well, these 2 big VIPs was what first raised the red flag, right?
Correct, 100%.
So that is true.
That is true.
Okay.
Yes.
So this when you guys saw, wait, what is Sean Penn doing in Guadalajara with this very famous Mexican actress? And knowing that Kate Del Castillo had recently tweeted about El Chapo, or what was like? Could it have been just because they maybe were having an affair?
It could have been, which probably I don't think would have changed the calculus much. But it was also that Chapo had a fixation with Kate Del Castillo. Okay. He was a fan of her work in the telenovelas and stuff like that she did. So when we saw Kate Del Castillo and Sean Penn, we were like, there's a high probability that they are going to be meeting with Chapo to try to figure out either like his biopic or whatever movie ambitions he still had. So that was what led us to focus on them. And by focusing on the pilot, we focused on them. And then all 3 of them ended up at this property in the mountains, and we weren't 100% convinced that Chapo was staying there, but we were convinced that he was going to be present to meet with Kate Del Castillo and Sean Penn.
So you were tracking the plane all the way as it was making its way from taking Kate Del Castillo and Sean Penn to the mountains. You were tracking it all the way.
We knew where they ended up.
You did. Because you were tracking the plane? Or
wasn't necessarily the plane per se. Plane was part of it.
There was the phone. Somebody's phone.
There was some other,
okay.
Some other stuff.
Has this not been public?
I don't know I don't know what's out there from the trial and that whole Kate Del Castillo, Sean Penn saga.
But one of their phones was being tapped.
Some
you guys tracked it all the way.
There was an electronic footprint that allowed us to identify this ranch. And we knew that all 3 of them were there, and we had SAMAR ready to assault the ranch. So they were
the Mexican Marines.
Marines. And you got to remember, Mexico was embarrassed. Chapo escaped. This, we're back to 2001 again, and all this other sort of stuff. So they were like, hell or high water, we're gonna blow up. We're gonna hit this ranch. And then, as that plan makes its way through the approval chain, through the Department of State, it's like, wait a second. Kate Del Castillo has dual citizenships. Sean Penn is a U.S. citizen. There's a high probability that this is going to be a violent encounter, and we don't want 2 U.S. citizens caught in a high high profile drug traffic shootout.
Right.
So we were told can't hit it until we're confident that they're gone. So they left, and Samar hit it. There was a big firefight. The reports are kind of sketchy. There's some reporting that Chapo was still there, some reporting that he wasn't. We were getting reports that he had been injured or like went down a ravine on an ATV, or there was all this different reporting was coming in. We couldn't make heads or tails of it. We didn't know what was true, what wasn't, but we knew that he wasn't there. Like they came up empty. I think a couple sicarios were killed, but he wasn't there. And we were kind of like, shit, we just
missed him again.
We just shot our shot. And now he knows without question that the Mexican government and the U.S. government has him as like bullseye number one in their sights. So we had to regroup now, the third time? And we knew he was running even with fewer personnel than he had in 2014. We started focusing on a guy that went by the nickname Cholo Ivan. And he was a feared sicario amongst sicarios. Like he was like
the baddest of bads.
Yeah. And in that world, like he scared the shit out of people. And that's not something that's done, easy. So we started focusing on Cholo Ivan, and there was another guy, I forget his name, but he went by the nickname Medusa. We started focusing on them. We had figured them to be in Los Mochis, which is kind of south of Sinaloa, like southwest of Sinaloa.
North of Culiacan, the capital.
Yeah, right? I'm sorry. Yes, north. Yes, sorry.
Just outside of the coast, right?
Right.
So a little bit inside.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a little ways outside of Culiacan, and this time they want to get eyes on the house. They want to see either Cholo Ivan or Chapo at the house. Time goes by, they see food getting delivered, all this other sort of stuff. They can't say for certain who's there, who's not. So they basically kind of said, screw it, we're going to hit it. So as they're on approach, as the Marines are on approach, they start taking fire. They return fire. They're lobbing grenades. Grenades are being lobbed back at them. Like it's a full blown, 10-minute firefight just to get into the front door. They get in the front door, firefight inside ensues. It spills out onto a balcony. I've got a picture of like a dead sicario with like a handgun on like a balcony of some sorts. Chapo's not there, but they've been, they've kind of seen this movie before. So they're like, all right, we're going to tear the house apart. We're going to set a perimeter. Nobody in or out. We're going to hold this until we find him. So they find a tunnel in a bedroom closet. And then they're like, okay, he escaped through the tunnel again. He's probably in the sewers. What they didn't realize was by this time, Cholo Ivan and Chapo had popped out, hijacked a car, and were like getting out of Dodge. And this is where it gets a little fuzzy because they're stopped by the local police. And, there's two different versions. And I guess believe whichever version you want. But one version says that Chapo basically tells the local police, you know who I am. I've got money. Let's go strike a deal. And he's taken to this kind of seedy hotel on the outskirts of Los Mochis. As that's happening, Samar starts getting reports that there was this carjacking, and they kind of put two and two together and be like, hey, we need to make sure that could probably be him. So they go to the scene of the carjacking, and then they see this kind of congregation of state and locals in this seedy hotel parking lot. So they roll up, and this is where the version is like whichever one you're going to believe. Like the local police are like, oh, thank God you're here. We caught him. We wanted to get out of the main thoroughfare, but here he is. The other version is they interrupted the negotiation to set him free. Yeah. At any rate,
they got him.
They got him. Yeah.
Finally. I guess you were very happy but also wanting to make sure he makes his way to the United States as fast as possible, so he doesn't escape again, right?
Yeah. And that was
January 2017.
January 19th of 2017.
Was when he was extradited and came.
And I had a buddy in Mexico. He sent me a text and he's like, they just put him on a plane for Brooklyn.
How did that feel to know that you had a part in all of that?
It was, I was ridiculously proud of like the men and women that worked on it for that long, and the tenacity at which they stuck with it, because they could have bowed out a number of different points along the way. When you talk about like when they first started getting indications that they were intercepting Chapo to the day he makes his appearance in a Brooklyn courthouse, like there were a lot of ups and downs along the way, and they just stuck with it. They ignored the naysayers. They believed in their work product. Tremendously proud. Like no one would have ever thought this group out of Nogales, Arizona would have been able to get to the by far the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere.
Right. Were you part of the trial?
I was not part of the trial. We went to the trial.
You did?
We spent a week up in Brooklyn. I remember seeing when the marshals ushered Chapo in, being it was anticlimactic. Even in my head, for as all these drug traffickers and stuff they had investigated over the years and stuff like that, I still subconsciously built him into this like criminal mastermind that was bigger than governments and bigger than agencies. And when he came into the courtroom, he was clean shaven. He didn't have his standard mustache. He was in a dark blue suit. He looked almost like Goofy. Like he just was like a middle-aged guy that was just sitting. He was looking around. He waved to Emma, who was in the courthouse. And I'm just remember thinking, I'm like, that's the dude. That's the guy. It was very like, just anticlimactic. But Jack, the same guy from the board all those years ago in the Border Patrol, he testified at the trial. And it was extremely important to me that as he looked out over the courtroom, he's looking out, he's seeing Chapo, who obviously knows his name. He's seeing Emma, who knows his name, the defense attorneys. Like I wanted him to see like the 10 men and women that were also there with him, so that there was like that sense of reassurance, like, hey bro, we got your back. Like, and he testified probably 2 days on the stand. Super proud of the guy, man. Like I'm like, man, you came a long way from getting rocks thrown at you in Nogales in 2000 to testifying against Chapo. Yeah.
And now Chapo is doing life in prison in Colorado. Right?
About an hour and a half from where I live.
Is it really an hour and a half from
I've
your
driven
live?
by it.
Wow. He's your neighbor.
Somewhat. Yeah, somewhat.
Did anyone ever talk to Sean Penn after that? I mean, I'm sure law enforcement talked to him, right?
Nobody from our team did.
No.
So when
do you think he knows that? I'm sure it's been reported and he knows, but I wonder what how much he, or even what he feels about that. The fact that his meeting with El Chapo ultimately led to Chapo's recapture.
I don't know. I was not happy because like we had the opportunity and there was no mistaking who they were meeting with, right? Like he is a wanted criminal over and over again. And, I understand the State Department's position, like, hey, we don't want to get U.S. citizens killed if we can avoid it. But at the same time, I was like, dude, come on, man. You know exactly who you're meeting with. Like, whatever happens at that point, like, that's on you. But the thing, I don't believe in coincidences. And the day after the Los Mochis capture was when his article dropped.
Yeah, that's right. For Rolling Stone, he wrote an article about his meeting with El Chapo.
Yeah.
Right.
So I wonder if that article, if Chapo was captured, if he wasn't captured, when that article would have dropped. I don't know.
You don't think it would have dropped, or would?
I mean, I think would have put a big bullseye on Mr. Penn.
Because?
Oh, because he put a lot out there. I don't remember. I read the article.
In terms of the details?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't. Yeah,
and I think Chapo being a free man, there's the calculation switches.
Oh, yeah. You're
I don't believe for a second that there's a coincidence that article was released the day after he was captured for the second time.
So you think that he felt safe enough now
Yeah.
that he's captured to put the article out.
Yep.
Maybe. Yeah, it was interesting. It was you're annoyed at El Chapo at Sean Penn for not being able to catch El Chapo when you wanted, and I'm annoyed at him for scooping me.
Fair enough. All right.
We both have our grievances with Sean Penn. Let's go to so then you were there. You stayed with HSI, right? For how much?
I did.
Longer.
So Chapo's trial wraps. I'm in DC. All this is going on, like, to be said, like, I have 3 daughters between the time of the initial capture and his trial. So I have 3 young kids. I felt that I had the opportunity to accomplish everything I wanted in my career. They wanted me to go. So I went out to Denver, Colorado as the deputy special agent in charge, ran that field office for a while with the special agent in charge. And then that was where we wanted to settle. We loved the West, loved the mountains. The agency wanted me back in DC. I didn't want to go back to DC, so I spent my last couple of years in what's called the Office of Professional Responsibility, which is essentially the internal affairs apparatus, not just for HSI, but for all of ICE.
Was the Shauna Ford case, that was before?
That was before. That was in...
Can you tell me a little bit about that case? And then I want to go back to
absolutely.
the internal affairs.
So going back to when I was working on the case against Nacho Pies, there's this little town southwest of Tucson called Arivaca, Arizona. It's cattle ranches. It's very picturesque, rolling hills, saguaro cactuses, all that. But it is a massive smuggling hub. So the U.S. Mexico border is just a couple miles south. There's all these canyons, and they smuggled a ton of marijuana through there. Cocaine to a lesser degree, but just shit tons of marijuana. There was a guy out there named Raul Jr. Flores who was a smuggler. He was no angel. And in 2009, in that 2009 era, there was a militia movements along the border where they were, doing their patriotic duty to patrol the border and all this, augment border patrol. And it was a mess. They would dress like law enforcement, but they had no law enforcement authority. They were, robbing aliens and stealing drug loads. There was all this like undercurrent of criminal activity associated with them. Well, in 2009, there's Shauna Ford, a guy named Gaxiola, and a guy with the last name Bush. They do a home invasion on Raul Jr. Flores' home because they know him to be a smuggler, and they assume he'll either have cash or dope that they'll either steal and then turn around and sell to fund their operations.
So wait, so they have a militia group on the border.
Yep.
Whose goal, I'm assuming they would say, is to fight against illegal immigration and drug trafficking, and yet they're going and stealing from a well-known drug trafficker so they can fund their own operations.
Yes.
Like the proceeds from drug trafficking.
Yes.
I mean,
that was what their plan was. So they do a home invasion at Junior's house. He lives with his wife, and at the time, I think his daughter Brisenia might have been 9 or 12. Shauna Ford and her gang shoot Junior. His wife calls 911. I've listened to those 911 calls. You can actually hear the screaming and the shots in the background. They kill Brisenia, the daughter, and they kill
12-year-old daughter.
12-year-old daughter. She was either 9 or 12 at the time. I forget which one. And they kill Junior. Somehow she, I think, got a gun and basically like fired back, and they fled. Junior's dead. Her daughter's dead. They end up catching up with Shauna Ford and the other two. Shauna Ford two of them got Shauna Ford, and the other guy's name, his last name was Bush. I forget his first name. They get the death penalty. The other guy pleads out and gets life in prison plus like 54 years. And, that really thrust the whole kind of militia border movement in that little town of Arivaca into the national spotlight, just because of the brutality of it and the fact that it was a,
it's a crazy story. Shauna Ford was sort of the leader of the group,
she
right?
was, yes.
Yeah, I remember seeing photos of her. It's such a crazy story.
Yeah.
And you were investigating it to try.
So I had a case on Junior. The other interesting fact is that there was a defendant that I had arrested years prior, who actually worked for Nacho on the South Side. He ended up being a prosecution witness for the state of Arizona against Shauna Ford, Gaxiola, and Bush. He testified against them and the fact that they were there for no other reason than to run the home invasion. So he kind of, in my book, redeemed himself a little bit from his drug trafficking.
Bad time. Yeah. When you were doing more of the sort of internal affairs, what cases, and this was internal affairs for ICE, correct? Not for CBP, for ICE. What were some of the cases that were coming through your hands, if you don't mind talking about it?
I can talk. I am non-disclosed in that regard. I can talk generally about what the cases were. So they range in anything from what's considered serious misconduct to criminal behavior. So that can be a DUI, which unfortunately is not all that uncommon. People get them, and as long as there were no aggravating circumstances, the courts would deal with it, and then the agency would deal with it accordingly. And then there were also complex, more criminal cases that our agents would work with other entities like the FBI and DHS, Office of Inspector General, who also do those oversight investigations. And some of those, they can be disturbing. There were, some rape cases involving, color of law, and usually in detention settings, immigration detention settings. There were corruption issues involving like visa fraud type stuff, where they would sell information for money in order to, and then the visas would be procured, like kind of a quid pro quo type stuff. Luckily, those weren't, they were not all that common, which is a good thing. But they were still there.
Yeah, so corruption wasn't widespread, but it existed.
Correct.
Just like it exists in the CBP.
Correct.
Reported a lot about this. So when I told you those numbers, when it comes to the CBP, which again was crazy, which was every 24 to 36 hours in the past 20 years where somebody was arrested from the CBP, does that and that kind of shocked you? Do you think, and this is because the CBP is actually keeping those numbers, they have a record for this. Why is it that ICE, do you think, doesn't have this record? And also, do you think that it sort of is that the numbers are similar when it comes to ICE?
I would venture to say that ICE does have those numbers. So, like, one of the mandatory reporting requirements was an employee arrest for anything, whether it's a DUI, a domestic, situation, or something felonious. So that data set exists within the agency. They have it. Yes.
Do you mind if I do a search real quick?
Sure.
I'm curious to see if
whether or not
because I tried this morning, and that's what my search revealed, that there's no actual record the same way that CBP keeps record.
That I don't doubt.
Yeah. So here, my search says that there are no public statistics that show how many ICE employees themselves are arrested per day, and no source reports a reliable per diem arrest rate per ICE staff. Does this make sense?
It does. It does.
So it doesn't mean that they don't keep track of them,
Correct.
but that they're not public, I guess.
Correct.
Is the So, but does it? If you're looking at these CBP numbers, do you think that the ICE numbers are similar?
I don't think they're that high. So I would see, when I worked in internal affairs, I would actually see the daily sheets of, employees that get arrested, and it was not multiple per day.
It wasn't one every 24 or 36 hours. But you're also not supervising the whole country, right?
So I was.
Oh, you were.
Like the internal affairs apparatus, everything, any employee arrest or allegation funnels into a central repository, right? Okay. So you would see employee arrests. That would be kind of the first upfront, like kind of bottom line upfront stuff. And you might get a couple a week, not every hour on the hour for years on end.
So when did the most recent recruitment surge start again?
It would have been mid 2025-ish. First half of 2025 was when they. So my understanding, if I'm remembering correctly, like when that big beautiful bill passed, it put a ton of money into the agency's coffers and also ballooned their workforce, and they had a set period of time to act on all that.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you think that's going, the recruitment?
Oh, it's a disaster. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. So, and I talked to one of my good friends who's in DC, and in one pay period in January of this year, 26, they onboarded 1,246 new agents and officers. So to put some context to that, in a typical year, and I can really speak to the HSI side, HSI might onboard 400 agents in an entire year.
Yeah, right.
So you're talking over 3 times that in a snapshot in a 2-week period in January.
And why is that a problem? Explain. I know, but
so it's a problem on several fronts. I think the biggest one to me is the fact that you cannot adequately assess, vet, and make a hiring determination in that short of time. So normally, like, a background investigation would take months. You know, they would comb through your past, they would talk to your neighbors, they would talk to, former employers. There's, polygraphs involved. There's all this other sort of stuff that comes in just for the background side of it. And that's to make sure that essentially you're a good human being. The other side of that is like the medical. So there's automatic medical disqualifiers, and I don't have the list in front of me, but if anybody has, say they're asthmatic, they would get put into a different bucket where they would have a more in-depth medical assessment, notes from doctors, what are your, prescriptions, all that sort of stuff. And then the agency's medical team would make an assessment that says, nope, this is manageable, or nope, this isn't. But that's all a very deliberate and time-consuming process when you're talking about, HIPAA acts and medical records and all this other sort of stuff. So it's, in my professional opinion, it is irresponsible. The hiring decision you make today, you're living with 10 to 25 years from now. So it is extremely important to do everything in your power to get that decision right, to make sure that it's the right person, that their background is not in question, their integrity isn't in question, they're medically sound, they're psychologically sound, all these things, because that is a multi-decade investment that you're making, and you're also putting that individual out on the street armed, ideally
in volatile situations,
right, to enhance public safety and to protect the American population. And I think what you're seeing is kind of where they're not getting it right, to put it bluntly.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think most people maybe don't know, but it's the first time in modern American history where federal force is being used against the civil rights of Americans. The deployment of military inside the United States has happened before, but it is usually to protect citizens. And, it's the first, or they're deployed when local and state officials fail to do so, right? And when there's a request, or at their request, but now, instead of actually protecting the citizens, there seem to be actively
there's
harming them, hurting them, and killing them.
I do feel there's a fundamental breakdown in leadership, where that you have undertrained, arguably poorly vetted, and ill-equipped people put into volatile situations. And I'll say the one thing categorically that I'm absolutely against is the masks. I've been against that from the beginning. I don't see any reason why domestic U.S. law enforcement should be wearing masks. That is something that, and I know you've seen it in your travels, that is not something that should be we just shouldn't stand for that.
No,
and I understand the doxing.
Yeah, go ahead.
They'll say like, oh, it's for doxing and stuff like that. My counterpoint to there is like, then stand up a threat division that looks at this, that understands the elements of like, what is it, 18 USC 119 or 111, whatever those statutes are, and issue target letters or open investigations into people that are actually making online threats. But to have U.S. law enforcement wearing masks, unmarked cars, no uniforms.
Right. It strips away all accountability, right, from them.
Yeah.
Because they can do whatever they want, and they're not going to know exactly who did it. And there's a level of protection that shouldn't be there.
I'm absolutely against it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what to say other than that.
Yeah. And talk to me also about the use of force, because this is something that seems very excessive.
It's troubling. It's hard to watch. So 25 years I served in the agency. Your use of force in all the training and all the real world operations that I was involved in, minimal amount of force necessary to complete the law enforcement objective. Mm-hmm. If that's an arrest, if that's a clearing of a building, whatever it may be. And that force can escalate and de-escalate at a moment's notice. Just because you escalate, you don't stay there. Maybe the person's like, oh shit, I'm good, I'm good. You bring it back down. And what I see here is it's just straight to the top. Yeah. And it's staying there. And I worry that becomes normalized, and that becomes, to a lack of a better degree, condoned. Mm-hmm. And I've never been out to like intentionally burn someone, but at the same time, like, there's right and wrong, and everybody knows in this line of work when someone's out of line. Mm-hmm. And at some point, people have to stand up and being like, that's not okay. And I hope more people do, because like, I worry that like this just becomes kind of baked into the norm. Mm-hmm. Do
you have many of your colleagues that are standing up and saying this? And if so, why not?
So
if not, why?
The departments had a very chilling effect. So there's two things. One is, in the internal affairs world, you have an obligation to report. So when you are a witness to any misconduct, however minor or severe, you're obligated to report that. If it turns out that you knew about it and withheld it, then now you've taken an internal affairs charge in of itself. The department has had a real chilling effect in anybody speaking out against what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I think, again, to my earlier point of the fundamental lack of leadership and accountability that leadership is pushing down onto its workforce, is kind of allowing or perpetuating this stuff to happen. Mm-hmm. In the past, this would never stand. Mm-hmm.
I know you're retired, but do you fear any consequences for being so outspoken about what do you think, how you think with what they're doing?
No, not really. I mean, I haven't changed, from when I started to now. Like, if I think something, I'm going to say it. Mm-hmm. People may or may not agree with it. I've lost friends.
Have you?
Over speaking out against what's going on, yeah.
So you started speaking out recently once these raids started. So what did they call you or email you and say, hey, I can't believe you're saying this? What did they say?
It was worse than that. A guy who I've known for, 2026? For 24 years. Yeah. Was at my wedding, texted me after the Renee Good shooting and said, if you ever see me on the street, you better turn around and walk the other way.
Wow. He's threatening you. Wow.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
I told him fuck off, and I blocked him.
Where do you think that's coming from?
I think it's coming from just the entrenched tribalism that, like, you're kind of seeing in the overall population. And there is this undercurrent in law enforcement about speaking out against law enforcement. Like, that kind of like the thin blue line type thing. Yeah. I understand it. I've never agreed with it. If I make mistakes, hold me accountable, or I'll own them myself. But we didn't take an oath of like omerta. Like, you took an oath to like uphold and defend the Constitution, right? And like, there's that you're hired because somebody assessed that you have a strong moral compass, you're principled in your beliefs, and you can enforce laws fairly, but also empathetically. That you don't need to use excessive force or these kind of like crazy tactics, and like that has coexisted for. There's issues, and you know you've seen those over the years, but those principles have held and been practiced by law enforcement officers for decades. And I don't know why it's unraveling, but like it pisses me off. And I think at the end of the day, it also, the other thing, if anybody can take away from this is like, there are great men and women in law enforcement, but there is this divide where there's like a lack of trust. I mean, you see it from the departmental level. And I've asked other people, I'm like, if there was another 9/11 or if there was a mass shooting, would you believe what the Department of Homeland Security says on the news? I wouldn't. And I think that is scary.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not trying to be like, you know, the sky is falling or theoretical, but like the divide between the public and law enforcement is growing. The divide between federal and state and local law enforcement is growing. And like at some point, like adults need to kind of bring down the temperature, and like that trust is broken. I've said this before, it's gonna take years, especially within DHS, if that trust of the public can ever be replaced.
Yeah, I mean, that's why so many people are talking about getting rid of the whole department because of it. I think that there's we're living in times where you're either with me or you're against me, right? And if you are with me, you have to stand with me, even if we do bad stuff or wrong stuff, right? You are part of my team, my tribe, right?
Yeah.
And there's zero nuance, and therefore, the issues are very black and white. And so the fact that you spoke out against your people leads people like your friends to then say, like, you're not part of us anymore. You're not part of this team anymore. You're not part of this tribe anymore. And that's not helpful. It's not good for anyone.
100% right. And I would say that like there are men and women that I know and have been in the thick of it with that I would do anything in the world for. Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter. It also comes down to like, hey, I'm confident enough in my moral compass and in my principles and beliefs that you don't have to agree with them. But you know what? Like, I don't have the energy or the patience or really the desire to be affiliated with someone if they're just going to be like basically like, fuck you, you're talking bad about cops. If that's your mentality,
right, this is not
that, then there's no net loss to me.
Right. And I mean, we can talk. I mean, there's things that you can talk around in circles, but isn't it? Tell me about the excessive use of force and what you guys were trained and what's actually in the manuals, right? Of what you should and should not do. And when you see it on TV, for example, the pepper spraying in somebody's face, right into we see this again and again every day in the news, it seems. Is that okay? Are you allowed to do that? If a person isn't, the protesters, going up to protesters and just pepper spraying right inches away from their face into their eyes, is that allowed?
So technically it's probably allowed. I would say that there's also this, just because you may be legally able to do something does not make it carte blanche authority or a good decision to do it. The other thing that I was always trained and practiced was every one of your actions as a law enforcement officer, especially in dealing with like arrests and stuff like that, needs to be intentional and deliberate and in furtherance of an objective. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? If what you're doing is not accomplishing that objective, you either need to stop doing it and do something else, or call in other people who can figure it out and assist you with it. So what I mean by that is, I've seen videos where there's a protester standing in front of a government vehicle, right? In my mind, I'm thinking, well, I should have an arrest team either in my vehicle or in a follow vehicle. And instead of getting out and just lambasting the guy into the snowbank and get in our trucks and leave, I'm going to put him in handcuffs and arrest him and take him to be processed. And if he's prosecuted, he's not. And if not, he'll be released. But like the constant physical conflict does nothing to further any law enforcement objective. So like if you're trying to spray somebody with pepper spray, you're trying to either disperse a crowd or stop someone who's being non-compliant, which would essentially either end up in an unlawful assembly and the state and locals would come in and just, push people out, or a person would get arrested. But again, I wrestle with what is the law enforcement objective of continuously spraying people or hitting with the batons or just like these like WWF wrestling moves that I've never seen or ever been trained or taught or anything like that.
Trying to tackle people to the ground constantly. What is that about?
And for what? Again, to what is your objective? And I think people, if they objectively look at these cases, will say there is no law enforcement objective. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Everything you're doing as a law enforcement officer should be in furtherance of either enforcing the law or accomplishing that objective. And I don't see it here. Like the vehicle, like how they handle vehicles, smashing out windows, and like there's just so many things. I just like where's the training? Where's the supervision? Where's the accountability? Like that.
Do you think that the Renee Good or the Alex Preddy's deaths were justified?
It's a tough question. I think having been injured, or I was hit in a vehicle, we were rescuing hostages in 2008. I'm very cognizant of where I place myself in front of or behind vehicles. I don't see a law enforcement reason for the officer who shot Renee Good to be standing in front of the vehicle. I think
and apparently he had also been hurt.
Which makes it even more questionable, in my opinion. I was hurt. I mean, I didn't have the degree of injuries he did. My partner had more severe injuries than he did. But after that event, like we did a complete debrief as a tactical team as to like, okay, how do we approach these vehicle scenarios? How can we better our tactics and train differently and stuff like that? We went to other agencies, ATF and FBI, and asked them questions and stuff like that. And that was after a single incident. So here, I don't know why people are standing in front of vehicles.
Why do you think he shot her?
I think it's policing by ego. Putting it bluntly. I think there's people have a problem with defiance when they're in a position of authority. I'm not in his head, so I can't say for certain, but in just looking at everything, that case included, I think there's a lot of policing by ego. And that loses every time.
So it's this idea that they're just so annoyed that they are in a position of authority and these people aren't listening to them or doing what they want them to do immediately. And they feel their egos are bruised and they need to do something and they need to show how they are in the position of power.
Yeah, and I think everybody kind of has a breaking point. One of the things that I do worry about is I was never verbally accosted day in, day out, all day, every day. Like being called a piece of shit and a motherfucker and all these things. So I don't care who you are. When you hear that day in, day out, it's going to take a mental toll on you. What I don't know is if the agency is providing kind of the psychological counseling that it should to kind of ratchet down the mindset of some of these folks that are dealing with that day in, day out. So I put some of the onus on the agency. I put others on the fact that you got to have tough skin. It's like I wouldn't want to be called that day in, day out. No. But at the same time,
but again, this is why recruitment is so important and making sure that you're training people before putting them out there, right?
100%. And law enforcement officers, federal, state, and local, does not matter. You are vested with the authority to take liberty and legally take life. And it took me a couple years to really understand the gravity of that and the amount of of authority that you're given, and that like that is a privilege, and they give that to you because they trust your judgment. They trust your abilities to actually execute your duties in the fullness of your capabilities and with empathy and fairness and all those things. But I think it's lost on people the gravity of the authority that they actually have, and that like the average citizen cannot take someone's liberty and not take life legally. Right. So somewhere along the line, there needs to be a complete reset of how we're doing things or how they're doing things, because this is not policing, and this is not law enforcement as I practiced it.
Right. And tell me also, Eric, how these are people, even the ones that have been in the force or as agents for a long time, that they are. This is not what they're trained to be doing, right? They're not supposed to be in military gear on the streets of America coming up against protesters. So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
100%. So the only time that I got crowd control training for maybe like a 4-hour block in two different areas in my 25-year career. Once at the U.S. Border Patrol Academy, which was basically like stand in a line. And, you know, back then they had those big, like wooden nightsticks, right? Hold the line. That was it. And then once when I went through tactical training, and that was more just for like crowd control and actually like protecting buildings and stuff like that, not dealing with like crowds that are either gathering quickly or unannounced and throwing snowballs and water bottles and all that sort of stuff. There is no training. And that's where I've said before, like the agency is sending its own people into a situation that they're undertrained for, under-equipped for, and unprepared for. Great. And unfortunately, these are some of the results that come when that dynamic is prevalent for as long as it has been. Yeah,
so it's not just putting civilians at risk, you're also endangering the lives of the actual agents in this case because they're not trained for this situation. Do you think Alex Paredes' killing was justified?
No, I don't.
Just you looked at the videos and you don't think there's any way that he should have been shot?
I think the videos speak for itself with regard to the fact that when you look at the facts, he did not have a weapon. He had
it before and then it was removed from his body. Right. Do you think any of your colleagues would think that it was justified? Or former colleagues?
Some will.
How would they justify it?
Like an us versus them mentality. And I think that's really part of the psyche that concerns me, is that there is that us versus them mentality. Like the public is the enemy. I think if anybody looked at that objectively, who's been in law enforcement, there is no justification for the use of deadly force. Nonetheless, 10 or 11 shots. Well, some of them while he was already on the ground, incapacitated. Yeah, I don't know how you square that.
Right. What would you, if you were still working in the internal affairs, what would you do?
I would be raising holy hell. I don't know how else to say it. Like this is not the agency that I spent 25 years with. This is not how we were trained. Immigration's always been a little bit of a political hand grenade, but at the same time, we were always able to strike the balance between the enforcement side, the humanitarian side, the understanding that, you know, there's various they call it TPS, temporary protected status for different countries, or, you know, stuff like that. Here it just seems cruel. And, you know, the literal, sure, did they, if you're here without status or illegally, did you break a law? Yes, you did. I probably broke 4 laws this week, and it's Monday. That being said, and I say that figuratively, a little bit of tongue in cheek, because, you know, the level of kind of cruelty and the level of force that's out there for civil immigration enforcement. So these aren't the majority of these cases or these incidents are not being charged with a criminal offense like that I
they're
did
not.
for 25 years.
Right.
So this is a civil matter.
Yeah.
So they're not even being charged with like an illegal entry or an entry without inspection, right? They're just going after them because they are here illegally, or like they have a final order of deportation and stuff like that. Or, the immigration systems, the legal process is in disarray as well. Like there's far too few immigration judges. I mean,
it takes forever to actually get papers and become documented if you wanted to. Yeah.
The INA was enacted in 1950 or 1952. It's never been really reformed or amended in a way that's consistent with the current migration patterns and the needs and all that sort of stuff of the modern era. So you're it's but to answer your question, like I would be raising a holy hell. I'd be like, how are we not, like, we have to hold up people accountable when it is this brazen. This isn't like, hey, I had too many beers and I own it or something like that. Like they're beating the shit out of people, and then not like they don't stop, and they're not.
Yeah, and like old ladies. Like I saw a video this morning. Was this like old lady where they even did a chokehold on an old lady?
Yeah,
is that allowed? Are chokeholds? Is that part of your training?
No, and I've been vocal about the chokeholds too. Like again, it goes back to like, what are you trying to accomplish when you grab someone in a carotid or a chokehold? Like that's by policy goes into the deadly force, even if it's momentarily, but. You're like, what are we doing? Yeah. Like, this is not us. This is not what I did, what like friends that I risked my lives for and they risked their lives for me. Like, this is not what we did. And it's painful to see. I feel for the, like, there's no winners in this, but ultimately, like we serve the public. We are public servants. And when you lose the trust of the public, you've lost. Like, I don't know how you fix that. Like, when you look at departments like that have had major events in the past where they've lost public trust, it takes years and decades and concentrated effort to rebuild that. I don't see it, at least not yet.
Do you think anyone is raising hell right now inside internal affairs?
Some of the people I worked with, to the extent they can, they are vocalizing the fact that like this is not
okay. So there are people inside the agency saying and actively voicing concern for these practices.
They are. There's a concern that they get crushed for it. Like they're
afraid of speaking out.
Yeah, 100%, without question. Some of them will do the right thing. Some of them will. Most of them just want to like retire and then
speak out like you're doing.
I retired almost 2 years ago, so I got a little bit of daylight.
I kind of wish you hadn't actually.
I would have been fired. There's no doubt about it. I would have been fired. So? Yeah, without question. Yeah, and I would have been okay with it. I mean, when you see career FBI agents, so not executives. But, for example, there was an FBI group supervisor in Minneapolis who resigned because he was told to change the case file of the Renee Good shooting from a civil rights investigation to an assault on a federal officer investigation. And I just want to, just for a second, I can't underscore the significance of that enough. I don't know him. But I absolutely respect him because he went through a 12 to 18 month process to just get hired by the FBI. He then goes to another 6 or 8 months of academy training. He comes out, he gets his first assignment. He's on probation for 3 years. At the 3-year mark, now he can kind of run his own cases. By a few years later, maybe he gets the opportunity to run his own group, which is where we are now. So he's got somewhere between 10 and 12 years invested in an agency, and has the wherewithal and the courage to say, this is not what I
signed up for.
Yeah. So kudos to him. Yeah. You got my respect.
Yeah, I think we need a lot more of him and a lot more of you. We need more people raising alarms
and
speaking out.
Like, it doesn't make you anti-law enforcement. I'm not anti-law enforcement. Like, I believe in strong borders and immigration enforcement and all that other sort of stuff. But like, there's a way to do it responsibly. There's a way to do it with empathy and fairness and in the confines of the law and in the confines of the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment. And I just, like, that's not where we're at right now.
No, it really isn't. It's scary. I mean, it's scary. I mean, as a journalist who's traveled around the world and seen so much of this happening in other countries, never expected it to happen here. I mean, the armed secret police on the streets of America, brutalizing American and killing American citizens. It's scary. And to think back to this idea that so much of it started because of this number that Stephen Miller pulled out of his butt, where 3,000 immigrants had to be deported every year. That's every day, sorry. It was something like 1 million something he wanted deported every year, which is about 3,000 a day, which we had a President Trump, who ran on his campaign was part of it was, we're going to go after the criminals, right? Criminal immigrants who are out there and they have no place in America and they should be deported. And I'm with him. Nobody wants criminals. Yeah, nobody wants rapists and,
we have enough, like,
assassins.
Yeah.
We have enough of our own here. Exactly. 100%. We don't need those people here. We want them deported. But what's happening right now, it's under 10% of the people being deported actually have any sort of criminal record, a violent criminal record in their case. And which also leads me to think, like, the amount of time and resources that are being spent in going after, the fathers and the mothers who have done nothing wrong, who are, working, in businesses and all around the U.S. And aren't we actually getting distracted from the job at hand, which is actually protecting Americans from the violent criminals that you were trying to catch from the start? Isn't this sort of you're using those resources, diverting these resources and keeping America more unsafe and unprotected in many ways? What would you say about that?
I mean, you're absolutely right. And I guess the way I would say it is that when you look back over the last 6 or 8 months with these various surge operations, right? Los Angeles, Chicago, New Orleans, Memphis, these other places, you're sending agents, and this is where I do put onus on the department and the agency, because they're sending HSI agents who have become kind of like a Swiss Army knife to try to solve problems and just plug and play, and to civil immigration enforcement operations and things like that. But at the same time, that means, and I mean this sincerely, there are child exploitation cases that are going unworked. There's human trafficking cases that are going unworked. Yeah. Drug trafficking, arms trafficking, you name it, that are not victimless crimes. And I'm not saying civil immigration is, but those cases a lot of them are technical. A lot of them take time to put together. And, by way of example, same guy I've talked about, Jack, he's been sent to these enforcement operations, and he has been essentially the cornerstone of what the agency's investigative priorities have been on the Sinaloa Cartel for the better part of a decade. Yeah. And if you don't think that those organizations are constantly adapting and changing and exploit, absolutely. So, and I use that as a firsthand example that I can say conclusively, like, we're losing on. We've taken him and some others out of that pressure that we've been putting on Sinaloa since 2012, and had a tremendous amount of success. I don't know what they're doing, but I can know what they're not doing. And I think you take that on a macro level across the nation. There's the big thing for me is, like, you have like child exploitation victims, you have human trafficking victims, you have all these like other crimes that don't stop, and these agents are dedicated to working those cases, and some of them are even trying to do the job like from their hotel room in LA or Chicago or wherever they are, because
so they're being deployed to these cities for these immigration raids, but they're still working on the cases
because they have that passion, they have that drive, and they're like, well, fuck it, I'm not gonna like not do the work that I was asked to do or believe in, you know. And I understand we don't always get to pick and choose what we work, but at the same time,
so all of this is actually keeping America more unprotected.
I think
unsafer than it was initially by diverting all these resources to the current immigration rates in many ways.
I think it is creating a lot of unforeseen or unintended vulnerabilities from these other transnational criminal organizations, because like people are distracted. And it's not just ICE. Like, they've sent DEA agents and ATF agents and FBI agents to this. And, you know, like, God forbid there's another terrorist attack and you have however many FBI agents who, like, they man the JTTFs of the world and stuff like that, and they're doing civil immigration enforcement.
Yeah, and these terrorist organizations, I've reported on a few of them, and these criminal groups and the Sinaloa Cartel, they are actively looking for ways to get the upper hand and to exploit. And they, like you said, they adapt and they see every single little opening to do what their main goal is. They pay attention. So they're looking at us right now as well. Yeah, I mean, this has been a fascinating conversation, Eric. I commend you so much for what you're doing, for speaking out. I know it probably isn't easy. I know that you sort of minimize how the impact that this has had on you, because you say you're not afraid, but I'm sure it hasn't been easy. And losing friends, I'm sure, is only a little part of how hard this must be for you. So I'm
great girl. Like my wife will tell me, she's like, your girls will be proud. I've got 3 young girls, and they're like, hey, your girls will be proud. And like, I can live with the people not liking me. That's okay.
Well, I wish there were a million more Eric Balliets out there.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.